Shalom, Esther Gidui-Yuat. It's Monday, June 20th. This is Africa 54.
On this World Refugee Day, shedding light on the difficulties faced by those displaced from their homes and countries. Hundreds of Tunisians protest in the capital against a constitutional referendum the president's opponents say is designed to cement his hold on power. And the U.S. House of Representatives committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol is set to hold its next hearing on Tuesday. We'll have an update.
Monday, June 20th is United Nations World Refugee Day, and a controversial British government policy to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda is stirring widespread criticism. British officials say it is meant to deter migrants crossing from France. But in a Calais camp, many refugees still want to make the perilous journey. Lucy Fielder reports.
Migrants in this camp near the French port of Calais still hope to reach England, despite the risk of being deported to Rwanda under a new British government scheme. Britain has agreed with Rwanda to send migrants who cross the English Channel illegally to the African country. The first British flight carrying asylum seekers was due to leave on Tuesday, but it was blocked at the last minute by the European Human Rights Court. The UK government says the policy will go ahead. It's supposed to deter people from making the trip. But Ahmed from Sudan, who declined to give his family name, is still desperate to go.
If they take me back to the Rwanda, I will feel that I'm a dead man, because my idea which I put in my mind, they have destroyed it. Yeah.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Saturday called the EU court decision a weird last-minute hiccup.
But we're very confident in the legality of the lawfulness of what we're doing, and we're going to pursue the policy.
Claire Mosley works for the Care for Calais charity, which has been lobbying the British government to change tack.
It's a really brutal plan. After all they've gone through to get here and get to safety, the last thing they want is to be sent back to Africa. People we talk to are really frightened of it, and I can't believe the UK government would do something like this. It's incredibly upsetting for us.
Aid groups estimate that hundreds of African and Middle Eastern migrants still want to make the perilous crossing.
That was Lucy Fielder of Reuters reporting. Faith Kasina, a regional spokeswoman for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, is expressing strong opposition to Britain's attempt to deport some asylum seekers to Rwanda.
We strongly oppose the arrangement or the deal to transfer asylum seekers from the UK. We consider this as the UK, effectively evading their fundamental obligations of responsibility sharing to asylum seekers. And we consider that this arrangement will put asylum seekers and refugees in increased risk to take on more dangerous onward journeys in their search for asylum.
While criticizing Britain for evading its international obligations to asylum seekers, Kasina urged them to halt plans to transfer them to Rwanda.
We consider again this being, the UK failing to comply with this, with international law, evading its fundamental obligations to asylum seekers, people seeking asylum and safety. And we just want to reiterate that access to asylum should not be and is not contingent on the mode of arrival, how people arrive in the countries that they seek asylum, nor is it contingent on the nationality of the person or people seeking asylum. And therefore, we want to continue to advocate for the United Kingdom government to consider more humane offering and providing protection to those that need it the most, rather than going ahead with this deal.
The first flight due to take the asylum seekers to Rwanda last Tuesday was cancelled after a last-minute intervention from the European Court of Human Rights led to new challenges in the British courts. A group of refugees in South Africa are begging to be moved to a third country because of xenophobia. The refugees from Burundi, Congo, Malawi and Rwanda say returning to their home countries is not safe and they no longer feel welcome in South Africa. Linda Giftash reports from Pretoria.
Some of these refugees have been living in South Africa for 2 decades, but now they say they no longer feel safe. Most are from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they escaped war. But increasingly, they said they've had their small businesses looted, homes robbed, and have been personally attacked amid growing waves of xenophobia.
We ran away from our country, running from tribulations. We came here in South Africa. We found more trouble, more tribulations, because xenophobic attack is real.
South Africa is home to more than 250,000 asylum seekers. This group says they've moved from community to community, but violence eventually follows. They're now asking the United Nations Refugee Agency to move them to a safe third country.
Any place that they can take us, that's where we can be safe with our families. We can live and move on with our lives so that our children can go to school.
Xenophobic violence has become increasingly pronounced in South Africa, with bursts of riots and murder since 2008. Earlier this year, amid a wave of anti-migrant marches, a Zimbabwean man was killed in a Johannesburg township, authorities say, because of his nationality. Experts blame the problem on the country's history of violence, socioeconomic issues, and growing anti-foreigner politics.
Normally when there's, with xenophobic violence is that when it happens, there's no differentiation of like, are you refugee, are you asylum seeker, are you, it normally affects people who are there. If government is not seen as doing anything, it also discourages migrants and refugees who are in the country because it's like, is it safe for me?
Resettlement is not an option for most refugees. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says only 1% of refugees globally are moved from one host country to another for exceptional circumstances.
It's really only the most vulnerable refugees who are eligible for resettlement. So that can be survivors of sexual or gender-based violence. It can be women and children at risk, people at risk because of their religious persecution. We really urge those refugees to take up the offer of local integration or repatriation because no one wants to see people living out on the street.
But these refugees maintain reintegration is not an option and say they will stay camped here until there's a plan for them to leave South Africa. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Pretoria.
Efforts are underway in Kenya to better integrate refugees ahead of the planned closure of camps that house more than 400,000 people, mainly from Somalia, South Sudan and Congo. One project backed by the International Rescue Committee provides refugees with microloans to start small businesses. Juma Majanga reports from Nairobi.
It's midday in Nairobi, Kenya, a busy time for Enoch Gatangi, who attends to customers at his grocery shop in the Kayole neighborhoods. The Congolese refugee started his business with a loan from Rangers Family Group, an urban savings and loan association to which he belongs.
I have so many customers, both Kenyans and Congolese, but most of my customers are Kenyans.
Gatangi's Rangers Family Group is one of 20 such groups that the International Rescue Committee, humanitarian aid organization, supports in different poor neighborhoods within Nairobi. The groups are part of a program called Refugees in East Africa, boosting urban innovations for livelihoods development, or Rebuild, a 5-year project to empower 20,000 urban refugee businesses in Nairobi and the Ugandan capital, Kampala.
The fact that refugees themselves have faced challenges in terms of accessing financial products from the formal financial institutions. The project had to divine innovative ways on how they can get access to finance services and also boost their economic livelihood initiative.
Under the program, refugees and locals form groups of 15 to 30 members. The members then contribute shares, which are pooled in a mobile money app account that members can borrow from to run businesses. Members say the project has improved their economic well-being.
Before, we could not access funds to invest. But since we came together and pooled our resources, if a member wants to borrow 10,000 Kenyan shillings, they'll get it. If another wants 5,000, they'll get it. So our lives have improved since we came together as a group.
Out of the 500,000 refugees in Kenya, approximately 80,000 are based in urban areas. Their participation in the national economy hinges on integration.
When we focus on economic empowerment, we are giving the vulnerable or the voiceless opportunity to also have a feel and contribution in the national cake.
The Kenyan government said the refugee camps will close next month, and all eyes are on the authorities to see what steps they will take. Integrated refugees like Gatangi hope that if the camps must close, those who reside in them will be ready and able to live in the Kenyan communities. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Nairobi.
It is important to use World Refugee Day as an opportunity to show solidarity with the millions of people across Africa who have been forced to leave their homes and are struggling to rebuild their lives in the most difficult conditions. But as VOA's Jackson Vunganyi, a former refugee who was born and raised in a refugee camp in Western Uganda, says to the young refugee or displaced person, this traumatic moment in your life should not define or determine your future. Here is his story.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. I'm the host of the Upfront radio program and the Red Carpet TV show on the Voice of America. Now, in the last couple of months, if you've tuned in to VOA each morning, which I think you should, you've probably heard me host our morning news magazine program, Daybreak Africa. I love what I do because I get to connect with millions of our listeners like you from around the continent. And my love for radio started at a very young age in far different circumstances. You see, I was born in a refugee camp, and for the first 18 years of my life, I had to navigate life as a refugee, fully aware of the daily struggles that my parents and older siblings had to endure to provide for me and provide me with an education that enabled me to be where I am today. And even though I eventually made it out of the refugee camp, millions of others from around the continent find themselves in the same place under the same difficult circumstances. And today the UN says that there are at least 30 million internally displaced persons and refugees in Africa. And that figure represents almost 1/3 of the world's refugee population. Many are escaping the same violent situations that my parents faced many years ago when they were forced to flee their homeland and walk hundreds of miles to a place of safety. And so today, as we mark World Refugee Day, I want to take this opportunity to celebrate and acknowledge the strength and courage of millions of people who have been forced to flee their home country, to escape conflict or persecution, food insecurity, and many other disasters. And to everyone else, World Refugee Day should be the day to remind you to constantly be aware, to show empathy and understanding for the plight of the millions of fellow Africans who have been forcefully and violently pushed out of the safety and comfort of their homes, lost everything, but have the resilience to rebuild their lives in the most difficult circumstances. To the refugees, especially young people, today I'm here to show solidarity with you. And my message to you is that in spite of all the suffering and hardships that you're going through right now, this is just part of your journey in life. It's a phase in your life that while it will inform you of the world around you, your current circumstances will not define or dictate your future and how far you'll go in life. And as the great Nelson Mandela said, everyone can rise above their circumstances and achieve success if they are dedicated and passionate about what they do.
That's our VOA Jackson Vunganyi, born and raised in a refugee camp in Western Uganda. What an inspiration. Thank you, Jackson. Zimbabwean health workers are on strike Monday after rejecting a 100% wage hike offer. The workers are pressing their demand for payment in US dollars as the local currency slumps. Zimbabwe's main nurses union urged the government to negotiate and warned that lives would be lost if their dispute was not resolved quickly. At Sale Mugabe Hospital in Harare, patients seeking treatment sat in the courtyard while doctors, nurses, radiographers and pharmacists left their workplaces to protest. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta on Monday welcomed the leaders of seven-nation East African community to discuss the security situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The meeting was attended by Uganda's Yoweri Museveni, Rwanda's Paul Kagame, Burundi's Evariste Ndayishimiye, South Sudan's Salva Kiir and DRC President Felix Tshisekedi. The security meeting comes amid border clashes between Kinshasa and Kigali, reviving decades-old animosities between the two neighbors. DRC is accusing Rwanda of the recent resurgence of the M23 rebel group, but Rwanda has repeatedly denied backing the rebels. Kenyatta called for the immediate deployment of a regional EAC force in eastern DRC to restore peace. But Kinshasa says it will not accept Rwanda's participation in the operation. The head of Tunisia's Constitution Committee says he is handing over a new draft of what he describes as a democratic constitution to the president on Monday ahead of a July 25th referendum. Tunisians over the weekend demonstrated against President Kais Saied and the upcoming referendum. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Hundreds protested in Tunis over the weekend against a constitutional referendum called by President Kais Saied. His opponents say he's likely to cement his hold on to power. The Salvation Front, a coalition including the moderate Islamist Ennahda, the largest party in parliament that Saied dissolved in March, organized the demonstration. It followed a similar protest on Saturday, called by the Free Constitutional Party over the referendum, and a strike on Thursday by a robust labor union over government economic reform plans, which brought much of the country to a standstill. The president's supporters say he's standing up to elite forces whose bungling and corruption have condemned Tunisia to a decade of political paralysis and economic stagnation. The country's main political parties say they will boycott the referendum, but opposition to Saied remains fragmented, as shown by the separate demonstrations over the weekend. Protesters on Sunday marched through central Tunis, watched by a heavy presence of police. Meanwhile, judges in Tunisia said on Saturday they extended their national strike for a third week in protest against a decision by Saied to sack 57 judges on June 1st. President Saied accused them of corruption and protecting terrorists, charges that the Tunisian Judges Association say were mainly politically motivated. Saied's moves have heightened accusations at home and abroad that he has consolidated one-party rule after assuming executive powers last summer and setting aside the 2014 constitution to rule by decree. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
The newest U.S. federal holiday, Juneteenth, is being observed Monday. Juneteenth has been celebrated by African Americans for more than 150 years. The day commemorates the end of slavery in the United States. Here's an explainer.
The newest U.S. federal holiday, Juneteenth, has been celebrated by African Americans for more than 150 years. The day commemorates the end of slavery in the United States. It was first celebrated on June 19, 1866. A year earlier on that date, enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, learned of their freedom and that the U.S. Civil War had ended 2 months earlier. And that notification came more than 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Since 1866, the day has been celebrated annually in Galveston, with festivities expanding to towns and cities throughout the country. The holiday got its name by combining June and 19. The date is also known as Jubilee Day, Emancipation Day, and Freedom Day. It's observed with family get-togethers, parades, and festivals. In 1980, Texas became the first state to designate Juneteenth as a holiday. Since then, most U.S. states have officially recognized the day as either a state holiday or a day of observance. National interest in the day grew following nationwide protests in 2020 over the high-profile deaths of George Floyd and other Black people in police custody. In 2021, Juneteenth became the 11th U.S. federal holiday, recognized by Congress and signed into law by President Joe Biden.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. On Tuesday, Lino Mudu has the latest in health news. Still to come, a Somali boy is on a mission to find food amid the country's worst drought in decades. We'll be right back.
Sedang kumpa nafasi kwamba arudi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hajirudi.
Ahora o que eu estou a recordar sobre o ataque e para a recordação que eu estou a ver sobre aqueles agentes
capturados com essas terroristas. Nunca, nem comunicação dela não tem.
Então, pus-me a faca dele aqui onde vocês estão a ver. Estão a ver este risco aqui. Pus-me. Cortou-me a primeira vez.
Nirimo rupi khove na samarupe lehi khove nirimo momubali rimo bubelia.
And here's a summary of some news making headlines in the continent. In Mali, dozens of civilians were killed over the weekend by gunmen who attacked several villages in the center of the country. M23 rebels on Monday opened the border town of Bunagana to Congolese civilians who had fled to Uganda. The rebels are registering all people who enter. And in Ethiopia, the Ministry of Agriculture confirms that an outbreak of unknown disease in the Addis Ababa and surrounding districts has killed about 100,000 chicken in a week. The House of Representatives committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol will hold its next hearing on Tuesday. The committee has sought to make its case against former President Donald Trump, saying his baseless and repeated claims of a stolen election incited his followers to violence. VOA's Arasha Basadi reports.
Last Thursday's hearing by the House January 6th committee looked to show how dangerously close a violent mob came to then Vice President Mike Pence and his family. Capitol security footage shows the crowd within about a dozen meters of the former vice president. Committee members say former President Donald Trump summoned the mob to the Capitol using a false narrative that somehow Mike Pence could single-handedly overturn the election results.
The thing I think that people need to stand out from these hearings is how much the president was involved in the lead up to January 6th, how we got to a position where so many people charged the Capitol because honestly, they believed that the election was stolen. And that's what I want people to see is, look, the president knew what he was doing. There was a plan.
Kinzinger went on to describe a recent piece of mail delivered to his home threatening to execute him, his wife, and their 5-month-old child. Friday, former President Trump at the Faith and Freedom Coalition conference in Nashville decried the committee as a partisan sham.
It's a one-way street. It's a rigged deal. It's a disgrace, and it's never happened in the history of our country where we didn't have we have no representation. They say, oh, they have Republicans. Who are they? Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, the crier. He cries every time he speaks.
Reach the line. We need backup.
The committee has been showing plenty of clips from January 6th, including audio from alleged co-conspirators in the scheme to overturn the election results.
And all we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock He let the legislatures of the state look into this so we get to the bottom of it and the American people know whether we have control of the direction of our government or not.
Committee Vice Chair Republican Representative Liz Cheney repeated the committee's charge that Trump knew his claims of a stolen election were false. She played this clip from one of Trump's former White House lawyers, Eric Hirschman, recalling a conversation on January 7th with lawyer John Eastman.
And he started to ask me about something dealing with Georgia and preserving something potentially for appeal. And I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, "I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition."
Referring to the peaceful transfer of power, Trump was famously the first outgoing president to skip his successor's inauguration in more than a century. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
That's our show for today. We invite you to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.